Let's look at another example. On page, let's go over to page 35. What sort of thinking dominates an alcoholic who repeats time after time the desperate experiment of the first drink? Friends who have reasoned with him after a spree which has brought him to the point of divorce or bankruptcy are mystified when he walks directly into a saloon. Why does he? Of what is he thinking? Now we're going to look at this guy's mind, this fellow called Jim, and we're going to see in his head just exactly what he was thinking just before he got drunk. Not after, just before, when there's no alcohol in his mind. Now Joe loves Jim. Sometimes he gets screwed up with Jim. Let's see what he can do with him today. Joe?
I love old Jim. He's my main man. Me and him think a lot. Our first example is a friend we shall call Jim. This man has a charming wife and family. He inherited a lucrative automobile agency. He has a commendable World War record. He's a good salesman. Everybody likes him. Typical alcoholic, isn't he? He's an intelligent man, normal so far we can see, except for a nervous disposition. He did no drinking until he was 35. In a few years, he became so violent when intoxicated he had to be committed. On leaving the treatment center, he came into contact with us. You know, they call them asylums in them days. Now they call them treatment centers, the same place. Just change the name of them places. Okay, when he got out, they said, we told him what we knew of alcoholism. That was step one. They told him what the problem was. And the answer we had found, and this is so subtly, we can see the answer is step two. So it looked like Jim had 1 and 2. He made a beginning. At the end of step 3, it says step 3 is a beginning, so it looked like Jim took 3 steps. You know, we see a lot of people in AA today coming in and taking 3 steps. That's all they'll take. Charlie and I said AA is getting like baseball. 1, 2, 3, and you out. Okay. Now, Jim took 3 steps. He did some steps. His family was reassembled. He began to work as a salesman for the business he had lost through drinking. All went well, but he failed to enlarge on his spiritual life. And the only way you can enlarge on that decision is quite naturally take the rest of the steps, but Jim wouldn't. To his consternation, he found himself drunk a half a dozen times in rapid succession. Jim got drunk 6 times, real quick. On each occasion, we worked with him. These were good AA members in those days. I doubt if they fool with you 6 times now, but they did. They helped him 6 times. Now, he said he agreed he was a real alcoholic in serious condition. He knew he faced another trip to the treatment center if he kept on. Boy, he would lose his family, whom he had deep affection. Yet he got drunk again. Now, Jim got drunk 7 times. These AA members are getting tired of fooling with Jim. And they say, look, Jim, how are you getting drunk? We're getting tired of coming over here. Let's see how you're getting drunk. We asked him exactly how it happened. This is his story. He said, I came to work on Tuesday morning. You know, Charlie and I studied the book, I guess, 10 years before we found this. I came to work on Tuesday morning. Where was Jim Monday? That's what it You know, we're bad about Mondays, you know.
Now remember Bill's from Vermont, and he's got a sly sense of humor.
Yeah.
And you're going to find it every once in a while in here. Here's one case. I can just see him just grinning and chuckling as he's writing this particular thing. I came to work on Tuesday morning. Let's look at the state of the mind just before this guy drinks. Now, he's stone cold sober. Let's see when he goes from sane to insane thinking, normal to abnormal thinking. Let's see when he goes nuts.
Okay, I remember I felt irritated. I had to be a salesman for a concern I once owned.
Now, that's probably normal thinking for anybody. I think I would be a little irritated if I had to be a salesman for a concern that I once owned. That's probably normal thinking.
I had a few words to the boss, but nothing serious.
Boss probably said, by the way, Jim, where were you all day yesterday? Nothing real serious, just enough to get us a little irritated.
Then I decided to drive on the country and see all my prospects for a car.
What's more normal for an alcoholic car salesman that's had a few words with the boss, that's a little irritated, to want to leave the shop for a while, drive out in the country, and see a person we already know to sell a car to? Normal, sane thinking for an alcoholic car salesman.
On the way, I felt hungry, so I stopped at a roadside place where they have a bar. I had no intention of drinking. I just thought I'd get a sandwich.
What's more normal? That if you're hungry, to stop somewhere and get a sandwich. The fact to have a bar in there is absolutely beside the point. We have no intention of drinking at all. We're going in there to get a sandwich because we're hungry. Normal thinking for an alcoholic car salesman.
I also had a notion I might find a customer for a car at this place, which was familiar. I'd been going there for years and eating there many times during the months I was sober.
We're not about to go in there to drink. We're going in there to get something to eat, and besides that, we might find another customer while we're in there. What's more normal than for an alcoholic car salesman who's hungry to want a sandwich and to try to sell another car? Normal, sane thinking.
I sat down at the table and ordered a sandwich and a glass of milk.
If you're hungry and you're in a place where they serve food, what's more normal than to sit down at a table and order a sandwich and a glass of milk?
Still no thought of drinking. I ordered another sandwich and decided to have another glass of milk.
If you're hungry enough, there's nothing wrong with 2 sandwiches and 2 glasses of milk. But now then the squiggly writing starts. Let's see what happens next.
Suddenly the thought crossed my mind that if I were to put an ounce of whiskey in my milk, it couldn't hurt me on a full stomach.
There's where he became insane.
Right there, right there.
There's where he believed the lie.
Yeah.
He believed that now that my stomach is full, I can take whiskey and pour it in milk and drink it, and it won't hurt me on a full stomach. Now this is absolute insanity for an alcoholic car salesman or any other kind of alcoholic. Now based on the lie, he now makes a decision and takes some action. Let's see where we go from here.
I ordered a whiskey and poured it in my milk. I vaguely sensed I was not being too smart, but felt assured I was taking the whiskey on a full stomach. Now, once it gets the alcohol in the system, the craving begins now, the physical craving.
Physical allergy takes over now.
The experiment went so well, I ordered another whiskey and poured it in my milk. That didn't bother me, so I tried another. So I started one more journey to the asylum for Jim. There was threat of commitment, the loss of family position, to say nothing, and the intense mental and physical suffering which drinking always caused him. He had much knowledge about himself as an alcoholic, yet all reason for not drinking were easily pushed aside in the favor of the foolish idea you could take whiskey if you only mixed it with milk. Whatever the precise definition of the word may be, we call this plain insanity. How can such a lack of proportional ability to think straight be called anything else? And here we see a definition for insanity. Insanity is a lack of proportional ability to think straight. In our particular case, we have a lack of proportion of the ability to think straight about alcohol. That's all we're looking at. In all other areas, we're quite sane. But when it comes to alcohol, we have a lack of proportionate ability to think straight about alcohol.
If we lack proportion about alcohol, or if we lack the ability to think straight about alcohol, then we're probably going to believe something that isn't true. This is the insanity of alcoholism. Now, you may think this is an extreme case. To us, it's not far-fetched. But this kind of thinking has been characteristic of every single one of us. We have sometimes reflected more than Jim did upon the consequences. There was always the curious mental phenomenon that parallel with our sound reasoning, there inevitably ran some insanely trivial excuse for taking the first drink. Our sound reasoning failed to hold us in check. The insane idea won out. Next day we would ask ourselves in all earnestness and sincerity how it could have happened. Bottom of page 37, my favorite story in the big book. Our behavior is as absurd and incomprehensible with respect to the first drink as that of an individual with a passion, say, for jaywalking. He gets a thrill out of skipping in front of fast-moving vehicles. I do not understand this fellow at all. But I can see him out here on the interstate, stand there waiting for a big truck to come down through there, jumps out in front of that truck, spins around 3 times, sees how close it can come to hitting him without actually hitting him, and for some reason he gets a real thrill out of that. I don't understand him, but I can see him doing it. He enjoys himself for a few years in spite of friendly warnings. His friends say, "Hey, Jack, you ought to quit doing that. You're going to get hurt if you keep that up." He doesn't pay much attention to him. He's having too much pleasure out of this. Up to this point, you would label him as a foolish chap having queer ideas of fun. Luck then deserts him, and he's slightly injured several times in succession. Now, he's getting a little older now, and he can't move quite as fast. They're beginning to hit him once in a while. Not bad. Just kind of bounces off of him. Now, you would expect him, if he were normal, to cut it out. But presently he's hit again, and this time he has a fractured skull. Within a week after leaving the hospital, a fast-moving trolley car breaks his arm. He tells you he's decided to stop jaywalking for good. He sings their national anthem. He said, man, these fractured skulls and broken arms are about to get me. I'll never do that again. But in a few weeks, he breaks both legs. On through the years, this conduct continues, accompanied by his continual promises to be careful or to keep off the streets altogether. Finally, he can no longer work. His wife gets a divorce, and he's held up to ridicule. He tries every known means to get the jaywalking idea out of his head. Not his body, his head. He shuts himself up in an asylum, hoping to mend his ways. But the day he comes out, he races in front of a fire engine, which breaks his back. Such a man would be crazy, wouldn't he? Now, you may think our illustration is too ridiculous, but is it? We who have been through the ringer have to admit, if we substituted alcoholism for jaywalking, the illustration would fit us exactly. However intelligent we may have been in other respects, where alcohol has been involved, we've been strangely insane. Strong language, but isn't it true? I think this is so important today. You know, due to education, many of us are getting to AA before we lose everything. It's easy for an old-timer who's lost everything to see how insane he really is. But some of us are getting here and we still got a job, still got a car, still have friends, still have a marriage, still have families. And we think, maybe I'm a little funny but just look how smart I am in other areas of my life. And sometimes it's difficult for us to see that insanity. Doesn't make any difference how smart we are in other areas. When it comes to alcohol itself, we've been strangely insane. And that's all we're really looking at. Now, some of you are thinking, yeah, what you tell us is true, but it doesn't fully apply. We admit we have some of these symptoms, but we've not gone to the extremes you fellows did, nor are we likely to, for we understand ourselves so well after what you've told us that such things cannot happen again. We've not lost everything in life through drinking. We certainly do not intend to. Thanks for the information. I remember exactly when I told them that also. That may be true of certain non-alcoholic people, who they're drinking foolishly and heavily at the present time are able to stop or moderate because their brains and bodies have not been damaged as ours were. We talked about the heavy drinker a while ago. But the actual or potential alcoholic, with hardly an exception, will be absolutely unable to stop drinking on the basis of self-knowledge. This is a point we wish to emphasize and re-emphasize to smash home upon our alcoholic readers as has been revealed to us out of better experience. Let us take another illustration. Let's look at Fred. Now, Fred's different than Jim. Jim had lost all. Jim was a little bit irritated the day he got drunk. Jim vaguely sensed he wasn't being any too smart. Fred hasn't lost anything. Fred is floating on top of the world, feeling great the day he gets drunk, and he doesn't sense anything at all. He just gets drunk. Let's look at Fred's story.
Okay. Fred is a partner in a well-known accounting firm. His income is good. He has a fine home, is happily married, and father of promising children of college age. He's so attractive a personality, he makes friends with everyone. If ever there was a successful businessman, it's Fred. Now, Fred's doing great. Remember, Jim lost his business. To all appearance, he is a stable, well-balanced individual, yet he is alcoholic. First of all, I saw Fred about a year ago in a hospital where he'd gone to recover from a bad case of jitters. It was his first experience of this kind. He was much ashamed of it. Far from admitting he was an alcoholic, he wouldn't take step one. Remember, Jim took 3. He said, he told himself he'd come to the hospital to rest his nerves. You know, we see a lot of those nervous people around. Dr. Demley strongly that it might be worse than he realized. For a few days he was depressed about his condition. He made up his mind to quit drinking altogether. He would never occur to him perhaps he could not do so in spite of his character and standing. Fred would not believe himself an alcoholic. Step 1, much less accepts the spiritual remedy for his problem. Step 2, he wouldn't accept that. We told him what we knew about alcoholism. They told him about step 1, and he was interested and conceded he had some of the symptoms. He said, I'm a little bit alcoholic, But he was a long way from it. He could do nothing about himself. He was positive that a humiliating experience plus the knowledge it acquired would keep him sober the rest of his life. Self-knowledge was fixing. We heard no more of Fred for a while, and one day we were told he was back in the hospital. This time he was quite shaky. He soon indicated he was anxious to see us. The story he's told us is most instructive, for here was a chap who was convinced he had to stop drinking, who had no excuse for drinking, who exhibited splendid judgment and determination in all other concerns, yet was flat on his back nevertheless. Let him tell you about it. He said, I was much impressed with what you fellows said about alcoholism, and I frankly did not believe it was possible for me to drink again. I rather appreciated your ideas about the subtle insanity which precedes the first drink, but I was confident it could not happen to me after what I had learned. I reasoned I was not so far advanced as most of you fellows, and I was unusually successful in licking other personal problems, that I would therefore be successful where you men failed. I felt I had every right to be self-confident. It was only a matter of exercising my willpower and keeping on guard. In this frame, I went about my business, and for a time all was well. I had no trouble refusing drinks, and began to wonder if I had not been making too hard of a work out of a simple matter. Now, Fred was probably getting drunk right here. We said, this ain't nothing, Stan. So one day I went to Washington to present some accounting evidence to a government bureau. I have been out of town before during this particular dry spell, so there was nothing new about that. Now let's be very careful and look. Remember, Jim was in the dumps. Look what Fred is going on. Look, Fred was really feeling good. Physically, I felt fine. Neither did I have any pressing problems or worries. My business came off well. I was pleased, and you, my partners, would be too. It was the end of a perfect day. Not a cloud on the horizon. Boy, this guy's feeling great, ain't he? I went to my hotel and leisurely dressed for dinner. Now the squiggy right. As I crossed the threshold of the dining room, the thought came to mind, it would be nice to have a couple of cocktails and go back to the hospital. That's what he decided. Had a great day. I believe I'll go back to the hospital.
Now, that's the truth. But Fred couldn't drink on the truth. He has to drink on a lie. So his mind said, it would be nice to have a couple of cocktails with dinner. That was all, nothing more. This is absolute insanity for an alcoholic to believe that. Now, based on the lie, he makes a decision and takes some action. I ordered a cocktail in my meal. Then I ordered another cocktail. Now we've got it inside ourselves. The allergy takes over, the phenomenon of craving develops, and now we can't stop. After dinner, I decided to take a walk. When I returned to the hotel, it struck me a highball would be fine before going to bed, so I stepped into the bar and had one. I remember having several more that night, plenty next morning. I have a shadowy recollection of being in an airplane bound for New York and of finding a friendly taxicab driver at the landing field instead of my wife. The driver escorted me about for several days. I know little of where I went or what I said and did. Then came the hospital with unbearable mental and physical suffering. As soon as I regained my ability to think, I went carefully over that evening in Washington. Not only had I been off guard, I had made no fight whatever against the first drink. This time I had not thought of the consequences at all. I had commenced to drink as carelessly as though the cocktails were ginger ale. Smart. Fred didn't even sense that. Now, is his real problem the fact that he's allergic to alcohol, or is it the fact that he believes a lie has a form of insanity just before he takes a drink of alcohol? You see, if he wasn't insane, he wouldn't take that first drink. And if he didn't take that first drink, then the allergy couldn't hurt him. So the real problem of the alcoholic sinner is in the mind rather than in the body. It's impossible for us to drink unless our mind agrees with that first. We've got to believe we can drink before we can drink. Now sometimes the mind might say, well, hell, I'd just soon be drunk as feel the way I'm feeling now. It couldn't be any worse. That is a lie also. Every time I got drunk on that lie, I ended up feeling a hell of a lot worse than I was when I expressed that lie. Always a lot worse shape. On page 43, last paragraph. Once more, the alcoholic at certain times has no effective mental defense against the first drink. Except in a few rare cases, neither he nor any other human being can provide such a defense. His defense must come from a higher power. Boy, he has convinced me in this chapter. If I don't have a vital spiritual experience, sure enough, I'm going to go back to drinking because of my insanity when it comes to alcohol. Even though I don't like the idea, I am convinced of the need for the vital spiritual experience.